Today in the studio, we have Carol Hedly. Carol is a talent management specialist who designs and delivers leadership and executive development programs. Carol is also a contributing author on Coaching for Leadership, writings on leadership from the world's greatest coaches, and Lessons in Contemporary Leadership, a collection of authentic leadership stories from senior business leaders. Carol and I also go way back. She was my manager on one of my first jobs right out of college, so I'm thrilled to be able to have Carol on the show today and have her share her expertise with us. Today we are talking with Carol about resilience through your job search.
This is the Career Cue, the podcast focused on helping you navigate the signals in your career to keep you growing and moving forward in business and in life. Here's today's host, Danna Redmond.
Carol, thanks for coming on the Career Cue today.
Absolutely, Danna. Appreciate being invited.
Well, let's get started. You know, the job search process can be so frustrating and really stressful for people. So how can people stay positive during their job search?
I agree, Danna. It can be really frustrating and stressful because there are a lot of things in a job search that are out of our control. And it's one of those unique situations where you're setting yourself up for a fair amount of rejection and failure, because oftentimes job search can be a numbers game. And it's really important during this time to really focus on resilience and caring for self, as well as being able to separate what's happening in the job search from who I am as a person. So kind of peeling that apart so that when things are not necessarily going the way that I'd like them to, or they are, that I'm not riding a roller coaster per se, but with proper resilience and having perspective about what's happening in the process, it's possible to reduce some of the stress that happens in the job search and as well build some self-confidence, which then helps the job search.
I love that. It's a little bit of a virtuous cycle almost, right? Like if you can have resilience, you can be confident, and then you're probably going to do better in your job interviews. So let's talk a little bit more about that. I heard you mention caring for self. What do you mean by that?
And resilience, you look it up in its purest form of definition, right? It's about capacity to be recovered quickly from difficulties and toughness, or to be able to think of it like a rubber band, right? Rubber bands, when they are new, they spring back very quickly. And I'm talking about resilience and being able to spring back quickly. And when I say caring for self, it's this idea of recognizing that, energy comes from a lot of forms. And when we are in a job search mode, it's a time when we are quite vulnerable. Because again, I'm putting myself out there. Mm-hmm. I'm putting myself out there, on LinkedIn and in networking events. And then I'm really putting myself out there when I put it in a resume or an interview. And so when I am that most vulnerable, that's the time when I need to make sure that I'm fueling myself so that I can be resilient. And I'm a big fan of Jim Lear and Tony Schwartz's work. They wrote a book called The Power of Full Engagement, Managing Energy, Not Time. And Tony Schwartz also has something called the Energy Project on that same topic, the idea being that energy comes from 4 main quadrants: mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. And so when I say caring for self, it's kind of, first of all, it's recognizing I'm in a really vulnerable place right now. So how can I step up my self-care? And then secondly, recognizing that self-care and energy can come from a number of different sources, and making sure that I'm tuned into each of those. And to the degree that I can, I'm fueling in all of those areas so that I can bring my greatest self to the table, not only for myself, but for my family, and certainly as I position myself for potential roles.
That's great. I love that imagery of the elastic band, right? I mean, it just makes a lot of sense that you can stretch back when it's new or it's fresh, right? And so some of that self-care that you were mentioning, right, helps with that, helps you maintain your own, I guess, elasticity maybe to be more resilient.
Exactly.
Now, the other thing you mentioned was, separate sort of, I think it was like the emotion from yourself, or somehow separate from yourself, because you are putting yourself out there. Any words of advice on how can people go about doing that?
Yeah, well, and I think there's a number of different options, and people feel different ways, right? Some people might read, some people might take a class. Counseling is definitely something I think I've certainly worked with counselors throughout my life in various times, and it can be helpful to get an external perspective. One of my favorite homework assignments that I heard somebody talk about once was to make a list of all the places in my life where I am effective. and then make a list of all of the achievements that I have made in the last 10 years, except in both cases, not discuss anything about work. And it starts to kind of show this broader picture beyond work, because oftentimes people can align with who I am and what I do, or who I do it for. And as human beings, we bring a lot more to the table than just the work. And so being clear on where are my strengths across all those places. The other two things that I've personally found to be quite valuable is, one was in getting outside myself and getting involved in something I'm passionate about or in the community. Right, so it's a way to contribute in a meaningful way to others. And the beautiful thing of that is I'm helping others, which makes me feel good and makes them feel good. And oftentimes I can build a network by doing that. There's some synergy there. Shonda Rhimes wrote a great book called The Power of Yes, and it's this idea of just say yes, right? So I actually experimented with that one time. And for 2 months, I just said yes to every opportunity, whether I thought that it might be relevant to my job search or not. And it was amazing what happened, right? The friendships that I built, the relationships that helped me either then or later. And frankly, it also got me moving and out of the house and connecting and contributing to others. So those are all ways to start to separate, who I am as an individual and versus the work that I do. So to be able to hear others talk about how I've contributed or had impact in a way that had nothing to do with job was also quite valuable.
That's great. That's an interesting perspective, right? To think that some of this, just getting outside yourself, hearing maybe others describe you or you thinking more than just the job you do or the job you're looking for, how have you contributed, can really help build your confidence and help you be that resilient. I love that advice. So are there things that people can do even before they start their job search or maybe really early in their job search to sort of help them remain positive and sort of help them go the distance with the job search?
That's a great question. And I love the way you phrased it, going the distance, because it is a marathon. And it's a marathon that often has spectacular highs and spectacular lows. and so it's very simple but hard to do, which is, make a plan, work the plan, rinse and repeat. And make the plan is a holistic plan. It's not just how am I going to do my job search. It's I'm going to be vulnerable. How do I talk to my family? How do I talk to my friends so that I get the right support emotionally in place from them? How do I set myself up in my workday? What's my workday going to look like, right? Nobody can do 8 hours of work. Well, maybe you can do 8 hours of job search, but it's pretty rough. And so thinking about, okay, if I am going to take care of myself from a resilience standpoint, those 4 quadrants, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, right? Am I building in the right plan around sleep? Am I making sure that I'm eating well and I'm eating for a marathon, right? So I'm putting things in that are healthy and that are sunny and good for me. Am I exercising? Is there a plan within my workday that I'm exercising? And so actually filling out a day as if I'm at the office, except the office is take care of me and having this plan around thinking for the long term about achieving this goal. So X percentage of time is going to be spent on networking. Another Y percentage of time is going to be on research. Another percentage of time is going to be on that self-care. And then there'll be the time of customizing resumes and applying for work. There is that plan then, not just for the day, but for the week. How many people do I want to see in a given week? Making sure that I'm getting out and I'm volunteering on things that are relevant to the types of roles that I'm trying to attain, and that I'm meeting with people for coffee or what have you, or I'm attending a local networking event. But the discipline around having a plan, working the plan, rinse and repeat. Discipline is hard, right? That comes back to resilience, and all of those factors play in. The other thing I didn't mention, which is also quite important, you asked the question about what do you do early on. It's that recognition of whether or not I consider myself a good networker or not. It's time to step it up. Because very few people find jobs because they send a resume off into a web search or a website that then elicits, another person and they gain a job. Very few people find roles that way. It's incredibly important to have a strong network. And if you don't have one, that's okay. The great time to start is today. And LinkedIn is a fabulous, fabulous resource to be able to reach out to people that, maybe worked at past companies or maybe work at companies that you're interested in working for. And, just reach out and a simple, hey, I see you work at this company and I'd love to have a 15-minute virtual cup of coffee with you. I'd love to understand more about the work that you do and the company that you're at. Most people will say yes, especially if you're really clear on short time frame, what you're asking for, and then you come into the call professionally prepared with 3 to 5 questions, then thank the person for their time and, be brief and be professional and then be gone. Most times they'll be willing to introduce you to others or even send you through an employee referral system, but it all comes back to the network. So, and if LinkedIn isn't your thing, then hit every professional organization that's in town and start attending their meetings and getting involved and getting on their boards and volunteering. It's a way to build your network. It's a way to keep your skills fresh. And it's a way to feel productive, which is also, again, that's back to that self-care.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I mean, I love the make the plan, work the plan, rinse and repeat. And part of that plan really does need to be your network, right? And as you said, right, you can do the virtual network of LinkedIn and go back and remember people that you used to work with and where are they now? Or, and I love that advice about even getting involved with local, organizations that are in your profession. And that's a great way to do that in-person networking and hearing where people are and what they're doing. So that it just even expands your network to folks that maybe you don't even know yet, are hanging out at those organizational meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you show leadership, right, you're getting involved and maybe you're on a board or what have you, then that's a great thing to have on a resume. And it tells your future employer about your leadership and your professionalism and your credibility, which is all a great message.
Right, right. Wonderful. And the other piece that you talked about, I think, was talking to others and getting their support. So really early on, sharing with your family, sharing with your friends that you're going to be vulnerable for a little while. You will be on this roller coaster of ups and downs, and asking for their support. And, how do you want that support? What does that look like sometimes is key to sort of sharing that with others.
It is, right? And it's also key to really kind of know what your story is, right? So I have to be comfortable with what my story is in order to share it with others. And what's amazing to me is the more that I talked to people, the more that I heard, oh, I've been there too. Hey, let me help introduce you to so-and-so. In fact, the role that I have today is directly as a result of my reaching out to someone else and letting them know in my network that I was looking for work. Then they heard of something else, who then heard of someone else, and then made the connection and so forth. Every job I've held has been through networking, every single one of them.
That's the power of your network, right? I mean, that's a great show for, what you can get and how to really use your network. So I love that. So we've talked about networking in the job search, but I wonder about, is there a role that your personal network can play and help you to maintain your resiliency through your job search?
I think so, right? There's something to be said for being able to call a friend. Brene Brown has this great analogy that she talks about your dead body friend, right? You can just call them for anything and call them up and just say, I'm just not feeling good today, right? I'm having a hard time, or, hey, this job offer I thought was going to come through. I really nailed the interview. They told me I nailed the interview, and then it still didn't come through because of this or that. But it's wonderful to be able to have a friend that you can call and say that to, because there's nothing worse than not sharing, right? You can kind of wither up if you're not sharing. And it doesn't help your resilience at all. And being able to talk through what's going on is part of that process. And you can have then a friend that says, you know what, I love you no matter how much of a rock star you are at work or not. And let me remind you all the ways that you're amazing. Right. So they can be our mirrors for us. And even to be able to find those that are in that job search with you is also very helpful, because they can be practice buddies and, again, help provide that so necessary encouragement.
Oh, I love that. Finding folks that are also in that job search mode, right? And can share tips and tricks or practice, because if you both need to practice, then I'll be the interviewer today and, you be the interviewer tomorrow. I like that, be able to lean on people that are in that same, in that same mode as you are.
And again, go have lunch with somebody and help support them and encourage them when they're having difficulty. There's nothing like helping others. If I'm not feeling great, if I go help others, then that helps both of us.
Right. I love that. Well, Carol, this has been great. I want to take a break. And when we come back, let's talk a little bit about what to do if someone experiences a setback and how do they sort of get back on track.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes at thecareerq.com, where you can also subscribe to the podcast and sign up for our newsletter.
Welcome back. We are talking with Carol Hedly today, all about resiliency through your job search. So, Carol, before the break, we had been talking about, how to use your network to, one, network and help you find job openings, but also how to help you with your resiliency and sort of that caring for yourself. So I'd love to talk a little bit about what happens if you experience a setback, right? Like maybe you didn't get that job offer that you really, really wanted. What are some tips for people to sort of get back on track with their emotions and their resiliency?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really important, right? Because oftentimes where the challenge comes in is when we fight what is, right? So we say, it's easy to dismiss it, right? When a setback happens, says, oh, that didn't really matter or what have you, and just kind of try and not feel the pain of what just happened. Not that I'm a big fan of pain, but but it's you go back to that rubber band thing. It's that maybe there's a break in the rubber band, right? And in order to heal, part of it is you have to go through it, right? You have to be able to, and again, this comes back to finding the appropriate person to talk with to say, that just did not feel good. That hurt. I'm a little jacked up, or whatever's going on. But to feel it, to allow the pain to move through it, and then at the same time, that's the signal, right? That's a signal that I know. That's a signal that people in my support circle know, which is extra vulnerable. So it's time to really step up the self-care, right? And in whatever way that works, right? For me, it's getting massage or taking a really warm bath. For others, it might be taking a run or watching comedy or, fill in the blank. But just knowing ahead of time, here are 10 ways to self-care or to self-soothe, to support me when I'm feeling vulnerable. And then here's another 10, right? Because depending upon the situation, I'm not, I'm kind of joking about it, but not really. I really do think part of that is just realizing that, it's me that has to stand up every day, look myself in the mirror and go, okay, I can do this. I can be confident and so forth. And in order to do that, I have to be willing to honor those other pieces. Brene Brown, she's got some amazing content, and you can find it out on YouTube for free, or you can go out to your local library and pick up the book or what have you. But she's got some great stuff on shame and empathy and vulnerability and resilience. I'm a big fan of her work, and I highly recommend anyone who has setbacks and things to just watch that, because she also does a great job in helping to parse between who I am as an individual versus this particular situation that happened, right? And then, setbacks are also the time to kind of go, okay, I've had a setback. I'm going to give myself X amount of time to have a pity party. And then it's going to be time to get back on the horse, back on the plan, work the plan, use all available resources, right? That's not the time to be proud. It's not the time to be proud. It's the time to reach out. And at the heart, we're all human beings. We've all had setbacks. And most people, I found, most of the time are willing to be quite helpful and quite empathetic and in remarkable ways if we give them the opportunity. So it's just real important to be willing to allow that, knowing that there are times in our lives when each of us have really given to others, and this is a time for us to be receiving.
That's an interesting idea, right? I love that. This is not the time to be proud and be willing to receive some of that help back or some of that care from others that you have likely given over time, to help yourself get through it. And then I love that. Then you're like, yep, get back on. You made your plan, now work your plan. And as you said, it's make the plan, work the plan, rinse and repeat. And that's what you got to do until you get all the way to guess where you think you want to be. Either get that job offer or, get that promotion or what it is you're going after.
Yeah. And there was another piece of advice I heard from a really wise mentor once that has been super valuable to me, and I'll share it in case it's valuable to others. It's this idea of there is a plan. And the advice was to consider that everything all the time is happening for a reason. And my job is to be curious and to recognize that I'm either in that situation because I'm supposed to be learning something or receiving something, or I'm supposed to be giving something. And if that prime job isn't the one that I received, then instead of it being completely about me, yes, I'll do some debrief and think about what worked well and what would I have done differently and all of that, but also to consider that maybe I'm not receiving that job offer because I'm meant to do something else. There's a bigger intention that's supposed to take place. This other job would have gotten in the way. And so my job is to go, okay, that wasn't the job. That wasn't the right one for me. I've learned from what I'll do differently as I prepare for the next one. And I'm going to continue to keep my eyes open for what is that next opportunity that I'm meant to be at, and make sure that I'm working my plan and preparing accordingly, to do that next great thing that I'll be doing.
Right. Yeah. So it really is, just being sure you're continuing to stay open to those opportunities that may present themselves, although it may feel like one has just closed down, right? But as you said, sort of give yourself time to get through that, but then really be sure that you are back open up to those opportunities and out there looking. And it may be something that's different, right? That, hadn't popped on your radar before, because you were so focused on, this one great opportunity or something. I love that.
Or to focus on one company. Sometimes I've seen in the work that I do, people get fixated on one particular company. And I think, why would you limit yourself that way? Right. Be clear about what it is I want to do and the type of work I'd like to do. And the title and the company should be least important. It should be all about, and so then that opens you up for more possibilities too. So.
Right. Well, Carol,
cast a wide net.
I love that. Carol, this has been a fantastic conversation on, resiliency. And I think that our listeners will be able to take away some great tips. So I would love to get into some of the questions that we always ask our guests, because I find these to be so interesting. So, Carol, what was your first job?
My first paid job?
It can be any job.
I'll stick with my first paid job. I worked at a bakery on a military base inside a base commissary.
Wow. Okay. So with that, is there anything that you still look at and reflect on from your time there that you think you use today?
One of the things that was important about that job was just to be friendly and to smile and be prepared for the unexpected. So lots of unexpected things would happen at that role. And I found that the job did not feel like a job when I was being friendly and having a smile and being open to the conversations and the connections that were happening there. And I would say that's something that I have pulled through all of my jobs, is I never assume that I never assume things about people, right? That somebody can or cannot help me with something because of the role they play or where they play it. And it's amazing the resources that are available when I kind of take that notion of sharing with everyone what I'm up to, because it's amazing to me how many times they will be connected to somebody either directly or indirectly that will be able to help bring the work forward.
Yeah, that's a great attitude to have. It's just going back to that, being open and friendly to everybody and just accepting them and sharing what you're working on and seeing where that goes. I love that you could learn that sort of at a very early job, right? That maybe wasn't, doesn't sound, glamorous or something, but it, you can learn some real base skills that you can carry through to the rest of your career. I love that. So, Carol, is there anything that you have read or listened to that you would recommend to others?
Well, you've heard me mention a couple of them in today's call, and the Brene Brown, I've mentioned a couple of different pieces of her work. Currently, I'm working through The Gifts of Imperfection, Living with Courage, Compassion, and Connection. I've somehow managed to have a daughter that joins me in trying to be a recovering perfectionist. So I'm enjoying Brené's Brown work, a different form of her work currently.
That's great. Yes. And there are so many great topics out there by Brené Brown. She's definitely a real favorite in the self-development, career development, all of that aspect. So wonderful. Well, here's a good one. Okay. If 90-year-old Carol walked in the door, what do you think 90-year-old Carol would say to you today?
Oh, boy. It really is all about just being really clear on what's important to you and what feeds your soul. And when you follow those things and you do so connected with others, everything else just falls into place.
I love that. I love the connected with others piece. That's been a theme through our conversation today. So I love that. Wonderful. Well, Carol, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for talking with me today on the Career Q. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My last name is Hedly. I think I'm the only one, so I'll be easy to find.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Carol, and this has been a great conversation.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to thecareerq.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles to today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a rating and a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again.
The Career Q podcast is produced by Lens Group Media and recorded at Mohair Studios in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood.